Hi all, welcome to the channel, welcome to the workshop. We now have issues 27 to 30 of FanHomes release of Build Kit from Knight Rider. Right, so we're kicking off with this build pack with issue 27. I brought the engine turbine over because these will eventually be going onto that, so that's why I've got that there. This is what we'll be doing in this issue. So we're just building up parts of the compressor, I believe, and then as we finish, we're going to be adding it to the turbine itself. So these are all the parts that we get. So these are all compressor parts and various brackets and things. We've got some BP, CP, GM screws. For some reason I did get an extra pack of CP screws in this, so I'm just going to put that to one side for the moment and just leave them there. So the first thing we're going to be doing is getting this part, which is marked as 27L, and this part is marked 27A. And we're going to be attaching that just like that with a BP screw, and you can see that the shape of this does mimic the shape of the housing here, so it's just a case of lining that up and putting a BP screw through that. So that's in that, just like that. So next we get in this box section labelled 27B, and this piece here labelled 27D, and there's a slot in the top of this one, and we're just going to be adding that into the slot. There's a hole in this one, hole in that one, and we want those holes to line up just like that. We're then going to be using a BP screw from behind and securing those in place. That's just going to go just in there. Just like that. So next what we're going to be doing, we're going to be getting this part labelled 27F, sorry, this part labelled 27F and this part labelled 27C, and we're going to be just slotting that over the little notch that's on this one, just like that. And then we're going to get the piece we just completed a moment ago, and this has a little key just here, and you can see there's another little keyway just on here. And we'll slot those together just like that. So that's looking just like that. And then we're going to be placing this in here with those parts facing to this direction, away from the housing, and we're going to be using another BP screw to secure that in place. So that's looking just like that. So next we need this little bracket labelled 27E, and we're going to be placing this one, try and get the right orientation, just like that. So we've got a hole just here, and we've got a hole just here. Now this has a little bump in it, and it's that little bump that sits on top of the silver block there. And we've got 2 more BP screws that will secure that in place, just to make sure that the hole lines up in the back of that block, just there. And then that one goes in just there. So that is looking just like that. Next we're going to be getting our other bracket, and that's going to go into the hole next to the one we've just done, and that's going to go in this way up, with the bracket coming off the top there. And again, another BP screw will put that one in place. So I'm just going to screw it in, and then I'll bend it around, put it in the right place. Just a moment, and tighten that one up. Not over tightened it, so it's a little bit flexible still. So whatever this will attach to can obviously move to make sure that is fully lined up in a moment. Next we need the little white reservoir, and that's going to sit on top of this hole here. And we're going to be placing it just in there, utilising the smaller hole to put a screw in there, just like that. And we're going to be using another BP screw for that one. So that's now sat on top of there, just like that. And then we're going to get this piece just here, and we're going to be linking up these 2 parts here. So we've got one that's got a little tab on it, and we've got one that's got a hole in it. So the one with the peg will be going into the other part of the gold part there, and then that allows a screw to go through here into the gold part to secure it in place. And again, it's going to be another BP screw. It'll be easier to get your screw through first. Hold that in place, and then just tighten it a little bit. Line that up on the hole in the other gold part, and then tighten up that screw. So that is looking just like that. As you can see, the screw is in there. It does go off at an angle. I'm assuming that is correct. It doesn't seem to line up any other way, unless you push that tank out a little bit more. In fact, I think we do need to push that tank out so that this is perpendicular to the engine, to this tank here. So it's like that. I believe that is how it goes, but I haven't tightened these screws overly tight, so that can be moved and adjusted if need be as we progress. Next, we need to get this little cover, and that was going to go on the top of here. Now it's got a shape to it, it's got a pointy part and a round part. So we're going to be putting the point towards the back of this, and the curved edge towards the opening end. And you guessed it, another BP screw. That just goes in, just like that. So the next parts we're going to need is this piece with the little prongs on it, and that's labelled 27N. And we're also going to need this piece, which is labelled 27M. So N will be going here, and M will be going just here. It's got a little peg on it, so we're just going to place that peg down into there, and that'll sit on there just like that. And this one, and so it's going to go just there, and we are going to secure that in place. And just to mix it up a bit, we're going to use a CP screw for that one. So that's now in there just like that. We're going to put that to one side just for a second. So next, we're going to need this very tiny little piece. We're going to need the engine turbine, and we're going to be placing it just in there. So we're going to be placing that part inside a hole just here. This is where the tweezers hopefully come in useful. We're going to be placing it so that this peg is facing out. So we're using this part here to go into that hole. So that is now pushed in there, as you can see. I've got that peg facing out. Next thing, we're going to be taking this assembly and we're going to be joining it onto this assembly. Now we've got some holes here, and we're going to be utilising those for this. And the way we need to put it in is this way around, like this. So you can see that the housing marries up around the air intake just like that, and then we're going to be pressing a couple of couple of GM screws in here, one just in here and one right down the bottom. So that's both those screws in there. You can see one right down the bottom there and one just here. And we're going to finish off this issue by taking this cover plate, we place it on there, and we're going to use some CP screws to secure that in place. And that is the compressor assembly all attached there, and that's issue 27 complete. Right, partway through 29, I realised that there are quite a few errors with issue 28. Now, not all of them were mine. In fact, most of them aren't. The only error I made, which I've now fixed, is on the left-hand side of this starter motor. Instead of putting it onto this part here, I accidentally put it onto the middle part of here. So I've rectified that one. Now, the biggest mistake by FanHome or whoever's designed all these instructions is one of the things you have to do after you've put the engine in is connect this cable up to the terminal on the battery. the cable that they said to use, which was 28H, is not long enough. It doesn't reach. That's the 28H in comparison. So you can see it's about another inch short. Going through both sets of instructions quite a lot, I've worked out this should be 28I, which is not the longest one you have, it's the second longest one you have. The longest one being L, which comes right across this part of the engine. So I'm going to leave the video as it is so you can see where all the bits plug in, but just putting this in front of the video so you can see the mistakes that I've rectified and changed around. So where it says to use I in the instructions, I think I've used H now, which H works fine. Just trying to find it. So 28I should have been used here underneath, and it goes from the starter motor to underneath, which is this cable here. And as you can see, there's still plenty of slack on that cable using 28H. So use 28H there, use 28I here, and then that will save a whole headache later on, which I have just had. So I'm going to continue on with issue 29 and hope I don't find any more problems with all these cables. As it happens, I've got two left over. One of them has fallen out the engine. I can't figure out where it's come from, so I'm just going to leave it out. I know where one of these will be the spare one from issue 27, and I know where that goes on issue 29. So that one I'm just going to put to one side. If I figure out where it goes, I'll put it back in. But I've been through the issue 27, feels like about 20 times, just to try and work out all the cable problems. But let's move on now to issue 29. Right, moving on to issue 28. Got quite a few parts in this one. Various wires, and it looks like a couple of bits of housing for the gearbox, and a couple of accessories for that, including a drive shaft output. Now, we've got quite a lot of cables and wires in this. They're all various lengths, and as per normal instructions, there's little to nothing to tell us which one is which. Just looking at the illustrations, I'm making a bit of a guess that 28L is the longest one. We've got this thick one, which is obvious. We have this one, which I think is the shortest of the longer cables. So you've got the three cables here. I believe this is the medium one, that's the short one, and that's the longest one. We've got these pair of cables here. We've got another pair of cables there, and we've got a slightly longer one just there. So that's the route I'm going down. If it turns out that it's wrong later on in the series, then I'm sure I'll find out and we can probably put it right. So first things first, what we need, we're going to be using this piece here and this bracket here, and that's going to place over the top of these two holes. Just looking orientation in that fashion. So there's a long piece and a short piece. It's the short piece that goes on there, ensuring that then sits in the center. We're going to use two BP screws to secure that in place. That's now looking just like that. We're going to get this half of the housing now is the left hand side. I'm going to be placing that just in there. Now you check the orientation because the shape of it matches up. This is an odd shape, so if you put it in the wrong way around, it's fairly obvious. So that sort of just slots in there over those two lugs, and we're going to use 2 EM screws to secure that in place. So that's now looking just like that. We're then going to be taking our turbine housing that we've been building up so far, and we're going to be placing that just like that, and we're going to use 2 more EM screws to secure that in place. So that's on there just like that. We're now going to take our drive shaft output, we're going to place that in there, and the other half of the gearbox housing is then going to sit over the top of there and basically just squash that in. And then we're going to use some more EM screws to secure that in place. So that's now looking just like that, and you can see that that is free to spin as well. And place that to one side now. We're going to get our 2 halves of the fuel filter. We're just going to push those together, just like that. And then we're going to be getting these pair of shorter cables labeled 28M. One's going to go onto this side, just like that, and then we're going to get the other one that goes on the top. Now I'm just trying to work it out, but I don't believe there is a top and bottom at this point in time. They look identical, so we're just going to mark that one as the top there. So it'll look just like that. We're going to bring our assembly back over, turn it back upside down. Now we've got a peg here, and we've got several pegs here. Now the way they want us to do it is this center one, coming from the center of this, will go on here, and this one here will go on to this peg here. As far as I can see, they want it to sort of sit there. However, there seems to be no mounting option for it whatsoever. So as far as I can see, it will just sort of float there. So just put that one on there. Get it into place. And that one will go on just there. Like that. Now, might want to just try and pinch these a little bit and bend them very slightly. Just try and get that to sort of sit in there. We are going to be attaching another cable from here. We're going to be placing it into the first peg on this housing, and that's going to be this one here, the slightly longer one. Just double checking that. Yep, so this one, labeled 28H, is going to go just on that first peg there. And then it's going to go onto the top of the filter. Just like that. And I say it just sort of floats there. There's no holder or anything for that one, but that's how it is. Now the next one, it says is 28L, which I think is the longest one. But again, it's not clearly marked, so it is a bit of a guessing game. Looks like what we want to do is put it onto the first one of these pegs, to the one towards the front. Just like that. And then we're going to be placing it through this gap here, so that it comes across the engine like that. Now, it looks like it just needs to float there for now. So we're just going to leave it hanging out like that. Then we're going to get 28K, which is the thickest one. And we're going to be placing it on the end of this gold connector here. You just need to support that as you push it on so you don't break it off. And again, that's just going to float out there for the minute. Then we need 28I, which I believe is this one, which is longer than that one there. On the bottom of the engine. It's going to go into the other pipe coming from here. Just like that. And then it's going to go off around here and into the back of the starter motor, just there, I believe. Just making sure it is the back, not the side. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is the back one. So lots of cables are going to get tangled. It might be worth just grabbing a pair of tweezers, because that one's already come out. And then you should be able to just grab that and put it the right way around on the back of that, on there. Just give it a wiggle. There we go. So that's on there, just like that. I just realised I made a mistake. I put a 27N, a 28N here, when apparently it should be H, which is one of these ones, which seems to me too long. So I'm going to leave it as it is with that, with H that length, I'll just put that one in there. And this one, 28N, actually goes from the center peg on here to the side peg on here. So just going to put that on the center peg there. Give it a wiggle. And then that one's going to go just on there, like that. And then we're going to use another 27H, and on the bottom here it's going to go on to this lug here. And we're not actually attaching the end of this to anything, it just wants us to route it under there, so it looks just like that. And that is that stage complete. And we've got this one that is spare for the minute, so keep that one safe and move on to the next issue. Okay, moving on to issue 29 after all the cable problems with 28. I mentioned in the little edit video that I had a spare cable, an extra spare cable. I now realise where that came from. I'd actually knocked it off one of the back of the fans, and struggling to get the engine in, I knocked off all of these cables, so it's something to be aware of when you're putting the engine in. So, right, without further ado, let's hopefully carry on with issue 29 without any more problems. So I've now flipped the car over. I'm just going to put these EM screws back in. I'm not dipping these in oil because I've already had this engine in once to discover all the cables were wrong. So they've already had their threads cut in. So that is now the engine in there. Right, so now we've got this cable that comes up from the bottom of the engine, and we're going to put it onto there. That terminal just there. We've got the spare cable that we had with issue 28, and we're going to place that one just on there, on this other terminal. Now this one is going to go onto a little peg that's just down here. Just about to see that on camera, I think. So probably easy to do it with tweezers. I'm going to just push that onto that peg just down there. I'm just going to route this around like that, because there will be the washer bottle that goes on here when I finalise that design. And I'm happy with it. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm just going to push it down a little bit so it's a little bit under the air filter, just like that. Bit of a disclaimer, I can't guarantee that all these cables go to the right places, but it's how I've interpreted the instructions, and it seems to be what fits and works. I have made sure that these two cables are up out here, because I believe they will go into the bulkhead that will be here eventually. We do need to hook up this cable here as well, and this one goes into the control box. just like that. So they're the two free cables that were kicking around, and the spare one from the last issue done like that. We're going to just put this to one side for a second, and we're going to look at the rear part of the chassis. So we've got the rear part of the chassis here. You will also need to retrieve this part, which is 5C, that was from issue 5, because we're mounting the battery box to this rear chassis now. And to do that, we're going to flip it over. We're going to be placing it in, so the switch and cable are on this side. You can see where the switch will go eventually. We're going to just place that just in there. Like that. You can see the couple of holes that line up for 2 screws. We're going to use 2 AM screws to secure that in place. Just dip that in some oil. I'm going to get that screwed in. I've been a bit presumptuous there. What I should have done is put the switch in first with a couple of screws. Now there is a on and off marks here. So you need to make sure that the switch goes the correct way around. I happen to know that the switch is in the off position. So I'm going to make sure that the switch goes over to the off side there. The 2 cables should be the on position, so make sure you got it that way around. Again, 2 more AM screws will hold that one in place. And now we should have secured the battery box in place. So it's 4 AM screws that hold the battery box in place. One here, one here, one here, and one here. Just make sure they're nice and tight. Just like that. And the cable comes off out this way. So once we've done that, we need to flip it over. You're getting this section here, and the 3 holes here will line up with those 3 holes there. And we're just going to place it just like that on there. We're going to flip it over, securing it from the back with some BP screws. So that's in just like that. Next we're going to get the little clip or fuel line retainer, and it's going to sit on top of these 2 posts here, just like that. And we're going to put 2 AM screws in there to secure that in place. So that's in there just like that. Just moving some things around, because now for the exciting bit. You're going to be joining the 2 parts of the chassis together. As you can see, it's now going to get much, much bigger. So we're going to flip that over, and you can see that these little tabs here, they will sit just like that, slot together, and they screw from the top with some GM screws. We've got 5 in total, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 here. So I'm just going to start with this middle one. Do the two side ones, and then we'll do the inner ones. And that is issue 29 complete. So you can see that's all screwed together, and gives you a good sense of the size of the model when it's complete. Right, so moving on to issue 30. So in this one, we're going to be building up more of the rear chassis and adding some extra little bits onto that. So these are the parts we get. So we've got the chassis rails, which are marked left and right. So we've got an R just on that one there, and the left one seems to be marked in a different place, but it's just in there. I don't know if that's going to pick up on camera or not. Just about see it in there. The left one, and the right one. Got this, which is just marked as a chassis section, and we've got this one, which is marked as the right rear axle bar. We've got some BP and GM screws. So first up, you need to flip the car over and protecting that engine with the Partwork Upgrades mat. I'll put a link in the description below where you can get one of these from. So starting off with the left hand rail, you can see where it's meant to go. You've got the little impression here. So just lining up those holes, and it does sit in quite nicely. So that will sit just there. And then we're going to use 4 GM screws to secure this in place, but from the other side. So just holding that in place, flipping it over, and we're going to need 4 to secure it in place, which is 1 here, 1 here, and 2 down here. So I'll start with this lower one down here, and the final one just down there. Right, we're going to do the exact same thing for the right hand side one. I'm not going to flip the car over, I'm just going to lift it up and put it into place from underneath, just like that. And again, we're going to use 4 GM screws in the same sort of locations. So 1 here, 1 here, and 2 down here. And that's that chassis rail in place. Next up, we're going to need the axle holder for the right hand side. So I'm just going to flip this one over. And it's got a little peg on it, and the peg will go into this hole, and we're going to place it just like that. That's going to be secured again using a GM screw. that's going to be secured from this side. Just like that. The final thing we need to do is we're going to get the chassis part. We're going to turn it around this way. We're going to place it so that the two holes will just go, the two pegs go into these two holes here. And there's another third hole that just lines up there. Now we're going to secure it from the other side using two BP screws. Just putting one in there and one in there. And that is issue 30 complete, and that pack complete. Well, that was a bit of a nightmare with issues 28 and 29 with all those cables and most of them not reaching where they needed to be and the inconsistency of lettering. But I think we figured it all out. If they're not in the right place now, I'm not going to worry too much. Visually, it's absolutely fine. If you know anything different, please leave a comment below. Maybe you can see where I've gone wrong or where FanHome have gone wrong with their lettering and marking. I did make a bit of a guess with most of the cabling and with their lengths, etc. But at the end of the day, it now looks absolutely fantastic. It is absolutely huge, as you can see, and it is looking absolutely excellent. Other than that, those cables, it all went together absolutely fine. If you did enjoy that video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of how it progresses or anything else that goes on in the workshop, please remember to hit that subscribe button and ding that bell, and I'll see you around.